Let's bring you the markets update now, and Asian stocks ticking up in early trade on the back of the strong corporate earnings, lifting sentiment despite concern over a weak economy. Meanwhile, the local index continues to track global markets with data including money supply, inflation-linked bond action, and a treasury bill auction set to affect performance through the day. Let's speak now to the portfolio manager at Sanlam Private Wealth, Greg Katzenellenbogen, and he joins us now for that update. Greg, good morning to you, and thank you for your time. Let's start off with the quick overview of how the markets are faring in early trade.
Well, the markets haven't opened up that well this morning, down about 0.5% on the top 40, similar on the all share, and about 1.4% down on resources. A little bit surprising given where the US market finished up last night quite strongly, but it's early days yet. The market's only been open for half an hour, and we'll see as things progress over the course of the day. But as I say, a soft open this morning.
Let's talk commodities. Oil prices posting mild gains on Friday, but headed for a decline. This is on the back of disappointing U.S. economic data. Talk us through that particular development.
Well, it's, the oil price now is lower than when the Russians announced that they were, and the Saudis were cutting oil production, but I think it's in response to the fact that global growth looks weak at the moment, and global trade is weak. You've seen that out of Chinese numbers, and the demand for manufactured goods in China is down, and it's the same story all over the world. It's services that are doing well as opposed to capital goods. But I think the market is concerned that the US might go into a recession, although that's been telegraphed for so long now that one is not sure. But in a prank call with the Federal Reserve, people who were Russian pranksters pretended to be President Zelensky of Ukraine and phoned Jay Powell. And he basically said in his conversation, thinking that he thinks that, a recession is closer to the US and maybe there'll be another 2 interest rate hikes. So the market thinks that, it's really oil prices following that. That's a trend of global growth going weaker.
I mean, that's a very interesting development. If it wasn't so serious, really, we could be having a chuckle here. Let's talk about the South African private sector credit, which has expanded 7.19%. This is year on year in March, after rising by a revised 8.29% in February. What can we read into this?
Well, I think the thing you can read is that it's down on the previous month, but if you're almost close to 20 odd months that you've seen a decline. So it shows you that the Reserve Bank's policy of hiking interest rates is having some effect. So although we had year on year, but if you look since June last year, it's been in a steady declining state. And as you saw, it was a revised 8% odd in February, and now down to 7 odd percent. If the Reserve Bank persists with increasing interest rates at their next meeting, I would expect that demand for credit will slow even further.
Yeah, let's conclude the conversation with company news. The Sony Group posting record annual profit driven by its music and microchip units. Talk us through their numbers.
Yeah, well, the numbers were, so it's, although the numbers were good, it didn't meet forecasts, so that was a bit of a problem. But their imaging income was up quite sharply, but where they suffered was on the gaming side, particularly although the number of PlayStation units sold exceeded 6 million, they never issued any new games, and actually the number of games sold were down, and they have now for 2024 have forecast lower earnings. So it's that good results is something that you can just look at now in the rearview mirror, but going forward they're projecting lower income. But it just shows you how important gaming is to the company, and they would need to start producing more games if they want to turn that sector around.
Finally, Greg, the Minerals Council of South Africa, formerly the Chamber of Mines, is calling for the privatization of Eskom. What does this look like?
Well, from a long time, people have been calling for the privatization of state-owned entities, and you've seen, while the government remains in their alliance with the trade unions, I don't see anything happening on that front. However, in practical terms, that if you extrapolate what's happening at the moment with private producers of power, in the future you can see, a lot of Eskom's power will come from private sources, and they'll really just be a distributor of that power, and so the unit itself must be privatized in all intents and purposes, that there will be a big private influence in that. But for the government to say that, look, we will privatize Eskom, I don't think that's a non-starter in the terms that you would think of privatization. But in practical purposes, Eskom will be privatized in terms of the power that it receives in order to distribute that.
Yeah, I suppose whichever way you look at it, the energy sector in South Africa is set for a radical transformation. That was Sanlam Private Wealth Director, Greg Katzenellenbogen. Thanks indeed for your time.